Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar, Katana Deployment Essentials. I'm Jordan Thistlewood. I'm a group product manager with Foundry. I look after Katana, Mari, and Flix. Let's get into what we have as our goals for this session. So I would like you to walk away from this with a better understanding of the Katana return on investment. Who are you going to involve in a deployment? The likely pipeline changes that you will need to make, and how to best focus your time in that sort of first year. There's some choices that we can discuss that impact how you roll Katana out, how you train people for it, what size of project do you want to tackle with it. We've got some anecdotes, and in general, Katana is something where you will find that it's worth the investment, it's worth the time. So let's get on to talking about it. So first off, let's talk about the Katana return on investment, the ROI. Everybody loves an ROI. And really, when at the end of the day, you could call it one thing: efficiency. And efficiency has many faces. It means different things to a producer than it does to an artist. But in the end, it is one thing. It is being able to do your jobs better. And really, the things that come out of a Katana efficiency ROI are the fact that artists are not sitting idle, waiting for machines to load, to do things. They do not need to span multiple machines. Artists do not wait for their colleagues to go home or try and kick people out of the building because they need to run across 20 different machines when they work with Katana. I lived that, and it was always amusing trying to get everybody out the door because you really just wanted to log into their machines, because you knew if you had to wait 20 minutes or more for every single file to open and you had multiple files to get on the render farm before you could get out the door on a Friday evening. Yeah, it was almost to the point where you want to take people to the pub, buy the first round, and get back to the office. Sequence-based lighting has huge impacts for everybody. Scalable look development. There's some wonderful examples that our clients have shared with us of how they've applied this. Render agnostic workflows. It's a big part of Katana. And then your ability to have a high degree of automation with Katana. So very quickly, for those that may not be as familiar, the Katana loads everything very quickly. Load times for a Katana project file are measured in seconds, not in minutes. And really, it saves that frustration. And like I said earlier, getting people out of the building so you can use their machines, so you can just open files, that doesn't happen with Katana. So artists get into their job very quickly. You are not going to pay somebody to sit there and wait for a computer. Your look development team can work across multiple assets at once. And in this particular example, we're using something called graph state variables to toggle between different toys that all have a similar shading need. And so an artist can do this in a very similar fashion in your projects. If you have a digital set extension, you have multiple buildings that share a common building material, you can be look developing that one building material across all the assets that use it at the same time, either toggling between them or flipping to views that have them all. There's great flexibility in that. Seth Cobb did a wonderful presentation that really encapsulates some of the most powerful workflows that come up with Katana in the look development sense, and everything from how things get shared across multiple assets to how you can basically do the look development of a larger asset with a very small set of shaders that are still tweaked individually through some very cool workflows. So please check that out. I think it's worth your time. We also can't avoid talking about sequence-based lighting, hierarchies of production. So that is going to come up a lot. Artists inside of Katana on the shop production side, this is their bread and butter. Working this way is everything to an artist working inside of Katana. It doesn't always work out that it is exactly the lighting and the technical and the comp split and layering that gets shared. But you should always be thinking of, how do my shots have something in common? How can I group them? Because Katana has ways to share that information across multiple project files if necessary, so that you can amortize the cost of doing something. That doesn't mean that Katana can't be used for a one-off shot, but the absolute smashing efficiency that you get definitely comes from being able to amortize the cost of someone's effort across multiple shots. Another example to go have a look at is this presentation from Ivalo Petrov from Worldwide Effects. Great talk from this year's FMX. And one of the things that I took away from it was amazing how at the peak of production, he cited that on their most recent Hellboy project, that they had artists who were submitting 20 to 30 shots for final each day, with sometimes up to 20 being approved in one go. So again, these are constant stories or consistent stories that we hear from clients. The largest that we've ever heard of was that one artist did 300 shots herself on one season of a TV series, spread across multiple episodes. One artist did 120 shots from one Katana project file on a visual effects project. And finally, the topic of automation. What people have often done in the past is they use Katana as a method for doing check renders, doing asset validation. You can basically build mini pipelines out of the Katana node graph. So use that to your advantage. Let that be an automation efficiency. That means that there's never an artist that has to actually do their own validation render. Katana can do that for you with your pipeline team. So partly what we're looking at, and we presented at SIGGRAPH this year, was that Rory, our Mari product manager, took Mari and Katana together and worked out the gaps that would allow for someone to basically tag materials in Maya and then using Mari and Katana to automate the application of those materials through Mari with a Katana-based turntable and getting that out. And this was something that was well received. Now you've got this new efficiency. You've deployed Katana. What would you do with it? So there's no one-size-fits-all answer, but some of the options you have. You can run smaller teams. We have clients who specifically made the choice to use Katana so that they can have fewer but more experienced artists on their team and either do the same or more volume at the same quality. And it's that idea of being able to sort of keep a smaller team. The biggest problem I've ever encountered in production is when you have to grow rapidly to deal with capacity issues. You end up buying more machines or leasing more machines. You've got to get the software. You run out of power. It happened to a company I was at twice. We bolted on an extra transformer and then ran out of power again. And then the city said, sorry, no more for you. So we towed that line of, if somebody used the kettle and the toaster at the same time, that production came to a standstill when things blew a breaker. So you can control your team size. You can increase production quality. So if an artist can spend the time on one shot that he would spend on 8, and then he or she is able to then spread that out across 8 shots because of this repeated workflow, all of a sudden you change the dynamic of, you've scheduled the work or the amount of effort that an artist can apply, and you've multiplied their efficiency basically. And you've treated it like you've given them, say, if in this 8-shot scenario, you've given them 8 times as much effort or time to complete the work. So production quality is absolutely something that you can change. You can change your production capacity. So you don't necessarily have to run a smaller team. You can do more work. You can take on more projects if you have the teams that can actually feed this new level of efficiency inside of lighting. And this is a really big deal. We've had clients that on their first projects have actually been able to swamp their compositing team. They have been able to outpace the animation and upstream departments. So this is where a lot of our conversations about production management and producers will come into play. Another part, adapting to shorter schedules. So again, if you have this ability to batch shots together, if you can say an artist is going to tackle 8 shots, but they have to only spend the amount of time on 1 to then multiply it across 8, you can hold your quality bar at whatever you had before this new level of efficiency and squeeze more into it. And, so it's really up to you. At the end of the day, the important part is keep all these aspects in mind, but know that there isn't one right way to do it, but you can mix and match as you need based on your business goals, your business demands, and the projects that come through your door. And for the artists that are involved in this efficiency really just means creative freedom. It means that the work that they signed up to do, lighting, look development, they spend their time doing that work, which means you have happy people. And this is a consistent bit of feedback that we get from people that work in Katana pipelines. They spend their time doing the things that they took the role to do. They're not managing, crazy load times. They're not doing anything else but doing the creative work that they signed up to do. All right, so I want to just point you in the direction of a few different things that validate this and help you sort of see it's not just our pitch on it. So this webpage or article has a great interview with Sterling from Sony. And I would like to highlight that even studios that have been running in Katana for a while, they have that initial surge of productivity. One studio told us that they had planned on their initial project with Katana to start with 12 lighters. They used 4 on their first use of Katana. So it's from that immediate, you deploy the pipeline, and then still years down the road, you'll find new ways to increase that. And so there's a lot of worth reading in this article, but I want to just call out this one part. So Sterling's quote of, when we looked at the numbers, our lighting times were less than half of that of the previous 8 animated features that we worked on. It was a very, very big savings. So left the URL there for you guys to read the whole article. It's a good read, worth checking out. But just keep in mind that the deployment that you have now, the efficiencies you gain, you have opportunities to grow them. And if you want to see more, please go to foundry.com/insights. You can filter by Katana, and then there's a number of articles, case studies, things like that also call out more. All right, so let's talk about people in deployment, or people involved in deployment. I've tried to break this down by who spends the most time, who needs to learn the most, and who needs to just be aware. So the people that really need to understand Katana, that are going to be the tip of your spear, that are going to have to digest the most, that are going to be sort of the key people in your deployment. Obviously, pipeline developers, they are going to be the lifeblood of getting things set up along with your TDs. CG supervisors, they need to be involved and really understand the ins and outs. What are the choices? They are going to be your bridge to your clients and your creative stakeholders and to your teams. So they need to make choices up front that inform how you get the most out of Katana. And that involves them knowing more than the average user, at least at first. Department supervisors have to really buy in. Specifically, the look development and the lighting department supervisors need to buy in. Other department supervisors, modeling, texturing, compositing, effects. They need to know the sort of parts that overlap with them. Probably texturing supervisors, if it's the look dev and texturing, it's the same thing. That person needs to know a lot. Modeling needs to know what hooks are they going to have to provide to facilitate look development in Katana at its greatest capacity. And then finally, department leads and TDs. These will be the people that deal with the per show variances, the tools, training artists. So they should be involved, and they should have a say in how things get set up, because they're going to be the people that are going to then interface with the largest number of users of Katana. Finally, you need to have a group of people that will be trained in Katana. This is your look dev artists, lighting artists, effects artists, render wranglers. These are folks that need to understand the software. They don't need to necessarily have a voice in how the pipeline is set up, but they need to know what your expectations are, what choices you've made, how do they pull in the material, where do they publish to, basics of tumble track and dolly. So if we think about how much time is going to be invested by CG supervisors, it's going to be on the order of weeks to come to terms with Katana. Artists, they can be up and running in a matter of days. I've talked with some studios and folks where they were contributing the shots in their first day. So once it's all set up and plumbed in, then an artist gets up to speed very quickly because they have a very limited set of things that they need to worry about. You tell them what nodes and tools to use. You've got the template already set up. So it's a much, much simpler way of working. Finally, you have some folks that need to be aware of Katana, but I don't think that they need to know the inner workings, but I think they have a strong impact on how successful Katana can be. And that is producers and production management, your internal creative team, and possibly your clients. Having inventory turnover from clients to you so that you can have enough in your pipeline to really take advantage of the benefits of Katana is important. Should you maybe really advertise to your client how super efficient you can be? You've got to keep, that's your choice about your business, how transparent you are with your efficiencies and what you can do. Some people consider that their competitive edge. But I think it's very fair that you inform your clients what you need from them in order to feed a Katana pipeline efficiently. The internal creative team, same thing. If you are working in sequence-based lighting terms and they are used to massaging every single shot individually, you have to sort of adapt them to this idea of, well, you know what, let's block out a whole sequence, and then we're going to go in and make adjustments. And if they want to hero individual shots after the fact, then they can do that. But if you are all not working to the same methodologies that take advantage of the opportunities provided by Katana, then you're missing some of that efficiency. And producers, production management, really, for you, it's about how many people do you need on the lighting team? What is their inventory flow from upstream? Can that work be passed through? Have the right choices be made at the right time? Because if all of a sudden one asset isn't approved in terms of its look and things like that, that could hold up a whole block of rendering. How is the composited team staggered if if you're using separate artists for lighting and compositing? The most common thing that we've had happen is that people run a normal sized team with Katana and then find out that they're not using it to its fullest capacity, or that they swamp the downstream department. Another thing to be aware of is the opportunity to change how you work. If a lighting team can get ahead of the curve, and you now have separation of your look of picture from your animation or technical animation, and they come from downstream or upstream departments, but if all your lighting is signed off, the lighting artist may not even need to be involved in the submission of the final renders. You could actually having them working in advance of their upstream department's completion, getting the creative and technical sign off, and then this is a rendering problem in terms of the final trigger of the upstream department approvals trickling through lighting, causing an automated render that then feeds the compositing department. So you've got lots of options as a producer or production manager in terms of how you flow a production. How does that impact your scheduling? And so you need to be aware of the potential of Katana, but it doesn't mean you need to know the nuts and bolts. You just need to be able to work with your department soups to best schedule the work. So let's talk about the pipeline changes now. Place I'd like to start from is this idea of what would be an ideal pipeline to start from if you were transitioning your facility over to Katana. And that would be one that uses geometry caches to feed the lighting pipeline. Often when you have these geometry caches, you've got a scene layout manifest file, JSON, XML, whatever it is, saying this Alembic file goes into this place in world space. Often you'll have either within that or in a separate file a manifest that basically says, with that asset comes these shaders. Some people are transitioning to Material X for those things. Arnold has done a lot of great work in the Material X space. Otherwise, it's just describing Maya shader networks in most cases. But all those things sort of all plug together. Now, that's, again, part of the ideal pipeline. Now, the next step is using rich metadata and tagging. So if you want to communicate more information about what render layers do you expect an asset to go into, things like that, what shaders get applied to it, all these things come together ideally in a tool like Katana very well. Now, shot production organized in hierarchies. So thinking in terms of to hand off between departments, what shots do they need first? But then also managing with that inventory deliveries from upstream to downstream departments in logical blocks. So in Katana, you rarely want to work one shot at a time. You absolutely can. There's mechanisms that you could spread out and share work between artists and have each of them tackling one individual shot. But in an ideal pipeline, whether it's Katana or not, you are turning over large chunks of inventory that allow people to build up a momentum. And so this is really what it comes down to. Some of the things that people don't have. So the worst case scenario, I would say, is if you don't yet do geometry caching in your pipeline, you're either just trading around FBX files or Max, Maya. You're basically staying within the closed ecosystem of your DCC and sharing its native file format. You have the most ground to cover. So where this all fits is something like USD has a great place for the caches, covers the description of the actual layout, covers USD shade, covers the look development, and it's a wonderful place for layering of metadata, and we'll talk a bit in a minute about how Katana makes use of that. Katana itself, if you didn't want to adopt USD, still has its own separate look dev manifest file called a Katana look file. And really, this is the big part of your pipeline. And if you don't do this, what changes are you going to have to make? If you don't think in terms of hierarchies, if you don't have the opportunity to deliver larger logical blocks of work together that can be grouped and assigned to an artist, it's going to be hard. And this is going to be the part that changes the most, because I'd say this part filters upstream through many more departments, because if your animation turnovers, your layout turnovers, your asset turnovers don't all support this idea, you are not going to get the maximum out of Katana. You will still get benefits, but you will not get the maximum. And so it's something that you need to think of over time. It may not be something that you can turn the ship quickly, but it's definitely something to work on. Because altogether, all this becomes the ideal scenario for Katana. But it's not all that bad, because there are really only two places that you're looking to change and insert Katana. Look development. So after you're finished with your painting of your rough textures, getting that involved with a shader, starting to do all that refined three-dimensional or 3D look dev, that's where Katana gets kicked in. Lighting, obviously, shot production, Katana takes and owns that part of the pipeline. The little yellow dotted lines would be, in this case, Katana look files that you're then stashing into your asset management system and trading back and forth between look dev and lighting through this asset management system. This is obviously a very simplified view of things, but these are the two parts of your pipeline that you are looking to change, and basically pull out whatever you're using currently to do that and inserting Katana. And we'll talk a bit more later about mixed workflows, where maybe what you start with is the lighting part of the pipeline and look development stays in your current DCC application. There are some ways that that can be done. Generally, any Katana deployment breaks down into four main areas. Your adapting to scene data migration, the Katana templates, so what you're doing inside of Katana. Asset management is a key component. We have tools for that. And then rendering in render farms. So once you have scene data migration, asset management, and rendering in render farms connected, you're good to go. You now have the ability to take everything from somewhere else in your pipeline and get it into Katana. And then really it's about what do you do with it inside of Katana. And the beautiful thing is, once you have those connections made, you can make what would feel like major changes to your pipeline by just augmenting what you do inside of Katana. You don't end up having to spiderweb too far out from Katana, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. So let's talk about the scene data migration. So first concept to digest is that Katana is basically a reference collecting machine. It doesn't ingest and hold within the Katana project file a lot of your scene data. So these are always Alembic or USD caches, VDB caches, texture maps, all these things sort of sit on your network. And that gives you a degree of freedom in terms of how you operate. Fair warning, that is the counterpoint to that is the dependency management for cloud rendering does come with some extra effort, because you can't just upload a Maya file and render it on the cloud. You do need to be able to pull all those, further sets of pieces of information with it. So there is a different balance. So part of what you need to manage in the scene data migration is the way Katana instructs its nodes to operate on something is by describing it by name and then by metadata. So you don't need to use both all the time, but name is definitely a very important part. So you can see in this example that we're calling out root world geo asset / star. This is actually a fairly expensive way to go about it, but in this particular case where we're doing a car configuration render and we're just trying to find the pieces of geometry that need the shader car paint, this is what you would do. So what does this mean? It means that in Maya, Max, Houdini, whatever your host DCC is that you're doing the work prior to Katana, so prior to look development, prior to shop production, naming convention is critical. If you, it's the hooks that Katana sinks its teeth into that are the basis of how you can keep updating the assets that you send through Katana. You can change your shot animation. It's all those things. And as long as those names stay consistent, Katana has all the information it needs to basically keep repeating. But if you change an asset, if you change, potentially the hierarchy within it, if it's dependent on the choices you made are dependent on the hierarchy, or if you change the names of objects within the hierarchy that you depend on, then you are creating a scenario where Katana will basically not be able to do what it did before. So naming convention is really important. A lot of clients set up tools to make sure that their assets, when they come out of Maya and tools like Maya, are named consistently. So that's part of your investment in a Katana deployment, is making sure that you train your artists and you give them the tools that facilitate that. Second off is the metadata part. Now, metadata can come from the extra attributes that you can export from Maya. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to live there. The drawback is if you depend on extra attributes as they come on to the Alembic, if you want to change the extra attributes, then you can alter them inside the Katana. But if you want to wholesale dump out a whole nother set of attributes, then it's better that the information comes separately. I think USD is really exciting on the idea of how you can layer attributes and information in. So there's that. Katana, you can work with sidecar files and apply the metadata after the fact. Can come from Shotgun, can from F-Track, wherever it is you've got this metadata that you want to use, tagging. All that Katana cares is that it is there when you ask Katana to do something with it. So if you read in your scene, you read in the rich metadata tagging, you merge the two, and then everything else below that point uses that information, you're golden. If you read in your scene, ask it to do something with metadata that isn't there, you're just not going to get the results you want. So all things to keep in mind. But Cell, which is where this is all based on, collection expression language, people at first do a bit of a double take and then learn to love it, and it becomes very powerful. Okay, so what is the overall big picture of your pipeline? So you're getting something from Maya into Katana. There's basically roughly three ways to go about it. So traditionally, there have been handcrafted XML or JSON file formats using Alembic and VDB to carry points, volumes, cameras, geometry, so forth. So texture maps get involved as well. But this handcrafted XML, we provided an example starting years ago called SceneGraph XML. It was a precursor to USD, or sort of on the same spirit, but USD is obviously much more thoroughly developed. So moving forward, you can use a custom JSON or XML file format if you have it. You can build a tool that will then direct Katana to load directly from that information. So if you already have that built, you can just use it as is. The other parts are then adapting to either a full USD pipeline or a USD as scene description, but using Alembic caches. And these are up to you depending on where you're at. We'll talk in a minute about Katana USD, Foundry USD, and how that all factors in. But USD is a great alternative to these JSON and XML file formats. If the rest of your pipeline is built up around Alembic caches, you can still continue to use that. You don't have to wait or spend time developing the Maya USD plugin. You can simply export your Alembics as you would expect, and then wrap them in USD schema files. And that's, if you can already write a JSON file or an XML file, you can write a USDA file. Your pipeline devs have got those skills. So forthcoming from Foundry will be Foundry provided USD nodes for Katana. So these are currently based on USD 1905. We will try and update them throughout the year as USD develops. It's a rapidly developing format, so it'll be tough for us to go blow by blow and keep up on that 2-month cadence that they're at, but we're going to make sure that we have the major parts covered. And these will be available as binary and as source code, so you can adapt them to your own pipeline. We have, since Katana 3.0, so a few years now, had the Hydra libraries as the foundation of our viewport. We've now taken the same technology that powers the Moto viewport, and which was basically an evolution of what was the Mari viewport, and made this into a Hydra render delegate. So what you're looking at is one of our first tests of putting USD assets with USD shade definitions with USD preview surface in there and running that into Katana as a viewport. So just on top of the sort of ingestion of USD data, we are making sure that Katana is ready for a full USD world, which includes things in the future like having ray traced render delegates. So this is the Hydra NSI project inside of USD View. But you can imagine RenderMan has announced theirs. There's the Hydra NSI project. Redshift is coming. So along with a certain forthcoming piece of technology from a certain other company in the industry, there's going to be a lot of happening in the Hydra space or in the Hydra API space, and we'll make sure that Katana is there for you on that front. On a different note about USD, the open source will eventually also have support for the export of light and ingest and export of USD shade. So keep your eyes peeled. We will let you know when it's all ready. Let's then take a look at the asset management side. So Katana has an asset management API. Allows it to connect to pretty much any asset management engine. The key factors here is that direct connection, path translation, and replacing the UI from a file dialog with something that you have control over and can customize. So whether you're using Shotgun, FTrack, Cerebro, some other custom asset management system, there is a dedicated API for you. So this will decrease the time it takes to get things up and running. Like I said, with the Houdini Engine plugin, a lot of people had been trying to recreate the Shotgun toolkit over and over again. So we worked with the Autodesk Shotgun team and have created a Shotgun plugin for Katana. So everything from loading, publishing, rendering, all the full suite of interactions of Katana with an asset management system now work. This is going to be open sourced. It's currently closed source in testing with a few clients. But once we feel that we've covered most of the needs of everybody, then we will open source this. It is probably going to be that sort of 60 to 80% of your needs. Everybody uses Shotgun kind of differently, or it's fine-tuned to their pipelines. So this isn't going to be download, install, and do nothing. You will need to tweak it and set it up for your particular pipeline, but we've done the heavy lifting. So we're very happy about that. Okay, let's talk quickly about rendering and render farms. So Katana supports 5 commercial rendering plugins. So everything from Arnold through Redshift, RenderMan, V-Ray, and 3D-Light. There's also an API for a custom rendering engine. So if you happen to have an in-house tool that you use for rendering, then you can plug that into Katana if need be. But the big part is that connecting to a render farm is actually pretty simple. Deadline and Cube from Pipeline Effects both come with Katana submission tools. And at the end of the day, a render farm just needs to know what the command line is and what the tokens are that you would like to fill in. So from our manual, you can see it's a fairly straightforward command line. Katana -bash -batch the file name. Then you tell what render node, and you tell the first frame and the last frame. So getting Katana hooked up to a render farm is not hard. What you get with the submission tools by Deadline and with Cube are that they're using our farm API. So again, another API that allows you to do more advanced interactions with Katana. This allows for checking of dependencies, things like that. This was more relevant in the days of shadow maps, where of course you had to render your shadow maps before you rendered the beauty image. Not so relevant these days, but if you want to use the farm API to have more of the hooks, be my guest. It's there and waiting for you. Otherwise, just go ahead with the command line and plug that in to your submission tools. Okay, if you've got crowds, these are 2 companies that have set up a procedural inside of Katana so that you can control their crowd caches and their manifestation in a render. So be it changing density, changing other details, you can adjust their crowd caches, which is pretty cool. The Katana templates are, well, they're your node graph. They're your Katana project file. What you should not consider is that someone will want to build one from scratch every single time. That's just not the way you work with Katana. Same way with Nuke, when you have a production underway, you do have a template that you start from. That's why we call them templates. You need to figure out the ins and outs. How are you getting things in? What do you want to do them once you have them in the Katana node graph? And then how are you getting them out? What are your render outputs? How are you then dividing up your scene? The Katana template or Katana node graph is similar to the way that the Nuke one operates. Each node is passing on some differently processed state of a 3D scene. Sometimes you merge them together, sometimes you delete parts and you branch, but all told, every single node is a different state of 3D scene. So what you need to do is think about your production process. I bring in my files. I want to apply shaders to them. I want to divide them into render layers. I want to do all those, next steps. So to ask yourself, what are those steps you want to do? How do you want to do? In what order do you want to do them? And then start to map that out with the Katana nodes as you go through our tutorials. One of the things to keep in mind is that, unlike Nuke, there are very few things that you have to do in certain orders. There are, things that have to happen in a particular order, but there aren't many performance traps that come around things like the bounding box changes in Nuke, or the opportunity or cost of concatenating or not concatenating your color corrections. So feel free to explore and build this up, recognizing that the node graph that you build for your first project will probably not resemble much of the node graph that you use in 5 years. You're going to build custom tools. You're going to become more efficient. All that is good. That is why Katana works this way. Once you have all the outside connections to Katana made, you can change on a project by project basis how you do things inside of Katana if that's the right choice for your company and the projects you're working on. So it's all good. The thing to keep in mind is how you use cell in your project. So the nodes themselves are directed to operate on certain parts of your 3D scene by cell, collection expression language. It can be an explicit pointer to a particular part of your 3D scene or a model. It can be an expression that uses just name searching. It can be name searching plus metadata. Or it can be any of that in a complex operation of, in this case, give me all the objects that have car paint, subtract them from all the objects that have rubber, leave everything else behind, do something to those objects. So cell is very powerful. And in this case, what this actual screenshot is showing is how this expression is populating a collection. So a collection is like a Maya selection set. It is a short name that you can then use to drive other nodes and say, and throughout your whole template, in this case, this configurator render setup, is that all the times that someone needs to operate with anything to do with the objects with car paint, be it assignment, be it render settings, whatever else, you can now direct Katana to use car paint and not this complex expression. You need to change the expression. You change it once in your template near the top, and it will flow through. So there's a bit of logic design in trying to sort of maximize the opportunities provided by Katana in the combination of the nodes, the order that you use them, and the methods that you use to drive them. Let's not forget the proceduralism. So in this case, child shaders, where one shader, the one that is on the shader ball on the left, drives the colors of the others, which then change only what they need to be different. This proceduralism can be used in lighting. It can be used in changing layout. It can be used in the look development and shaders. It can be used in many aspects of shot production and look development. So do not forget to make use of this. Explore it. It will grow with you. There are also 4 key areas for you to think about for building out tools to use within these templates that you give your artists. So macros are like gizmos. They're a set of nodes collapsed into a singular node, given a top level set of controls. So you could have complex processing going on inside with 3 controls, and that could be sliders, numbers, colors, whatever it is you need. Live groups are sort of many things. They're like the Maya file referencing system in that you can take a set of nodes from one particular project file, you can group them together, and then you can write them out to disk. They can then be read into another project file. And this is a way that you can actually distribute parts of the work that take place inside a Katana between multiple artists, multiple projects. You could distribute your sequence lighting this way. You could black box a whole large section of your work. The other part of this is that, like macros, you can create a custom UI on top. So this makes them more like Houdini HDAs. So you've got multiple ways now to basically package and share tools or sections of your Katana template. Super tools are a system whereby you can create a very customized UI that is expressed as a node that can change its contents. So the Gaffer 3 is a perfect example. Every time you create a light inside of a Gaffer 3, you're actually creating a series of nodes that create a light shader, join those two together, assign them, change parameters on it, and it manages all that for you. So instead of an artist having to have tens of nodes for tens of lights, they will just manage 10 lights. And then finally, your programmers can write custom ops that can be packaged up as custom nodes. So this is something that comes in handy when you need to extend your pipeline in ways that the macros with OpsScript, and we'll cover OpsScript in a minute, don't cover. Very specific workflows, heavy processing workflows that need all that C can bring to the equation. So, segueing from custom nodes, let's talk about the actual languages of the APIs that are available to your team. We used Lua. I strongly advise that you provide some training opportunities for your team with Lua. It will be worth the investment of their time to learn it. Lua is used inside of a node called the OpsScript node. The OpsScript node is a node that can be plugged in inline, targeted with a cell expression to operate on certain parts of your scene, and then it will have custom operations that you can plug into it using Lua. These are most often wrapped up in macros and distributed with a very simplified set of controls for the artist. So this is usually what the TDs on a team will make. So your development team is usually working on custom nodes, maybe some OpsScript macros. But generally, on a show-by-show basis, Lua with OpsScript packaged as macros is an incredible way for your team to build show-specific tools that solve those show-specific problems. They come up, they're going to be on that one show, they're going to go away with that show. So those are awesome. C API is there for your team to build the custom nodes. C, not C++, was a conscious choice to make sure that there's a lot of sort of compatibility and longevity through your pipeline. And then finally, Python. So Python is what allows you to automate the Katana node graph, what you can use to alter Katana project files from the script and shell mode. And it is what connects currently Katana to asset management systems, render farms, things like that. Why is Python not part of the 3D scene processing toolkit? Short answer is performance. Python just cannot keep up with the multi-threaded nature of Lua for processing large scene graphs. And considering that you can very easily build tools that have to do a lot of heavy lifting, that performance limitation of Python was a deal breaker. And so that is why Lua has taken that position. Finally, let's talk about where to focus your time. There are a few considerations. The first one that comes up a lot with clients, should they build a shot pipeline first and feed it from another DCC, or go in with both feet and tackle asset and shot production pipelines in the same deployment? There's no right or wrong answer. It really is up to you. In the full pipeline, when it comes to everything else, you would do the typical steps of asset build, layout, animation in a tool like Maya. You would use USD or Alembic to bring that information across, and you would complete your shot production and look development steps inside of Katana. It is possible with the various rendering plugins to do some of your look development inside of Maya or Max or Houdini and then move that across. So Arnold with the Material X nodes, VR scene file, translation with V-Ray. RenderMan has their shader palette that goes between everything. 3Delight is all OSL, so you can just script the nodes across very easily. So across the breadth of the rendering plugins, there are definitely ways to stay in your host DCC for a while longer, build out your shot pipeline, figure out that part of Katana, and then move your asset production. Would you want to continue your asset production in your host DCC forever? I'd say no. There are too many missed opportunities inside of Katana that that would sort of dilute your investment. So things like the ability to use child shaders and the proceduralism inside of Katana to do the look development across multiple assets at the same time is something that can't be ignored. There are teams that have chosen to just bite the bullet. The investment you have to make is there are more people to train. There's more surface area of a pipeline to build or augment, but you gain with it right from the outset a greater ability to maximize your investment. And if you wanted to know more about those, I would definitely refer you again to a great production example from Seth Cobb in his presentation at SIGGRAPH 2018. And then also, I would encourage you to take a look at Ivalo's presentation from this year's FMX. He talks about how Worldwide Effects and their sister company both worked on Hellboy, and they traded assets, and where one group had worked in V-Ray and the other group had worked in RenderMan, but they were able to push and pull this between the two rendering engines because of the workflows inside of Katana. Keep in mind, if you're squeezed on one or the other, you always want to focus on the shot pipeline, and you can bring in the asset production pipeline. You are going to invest in making tools to bring that information from your DCC into Katana that you may not keep long term. So balance out your choice. Talk with us, find out what are the pros and cons. So the summary of how you need to spend your time: your first investment of time is going to be in the 3 blocks in green: the scene data migration, the asset management connections, and the render farms. My feeling is that the asset management, if you have Shotgun, is going to be a lot easier. We will help you and give you guidance if you stumble and have questions about how to get things like F-Track or custom asset management plugins set up. The rendering and render farms is probably going to be your easiest deployment. And the scene data migration really depends on where are you now as a facility. What are you doing? Like I said before, if you already geocache, if you already have a manifest file, then you already have all the building blocks, and you just decide whether or not you want to adopt a USD flow for that information, or whether you just want to build out the workflows to get your file formats as you have them in the Katana. And then the Katana templates, it's going to be an evolution. I wanted to thank you all for taking a time out of your day or your evening to spend with us, and I hope this has been informative. Please do give us feedback on what other information would you like to see in the webinar series like this. If you would like to know more about the Asset Management API or details of building out your Katana templates, do let us know, and we'd love to do more videos like this to help you out. But without further ado, let's jump into the Q&A.